So with South Park The Fractured But Whole, I think that they tried really hard with this title, but I think in the end, they really rushed the plot near maybe after the second half of the game, and this caused the game to have a really bad ending. I'm not gonna put any spoilers in this review, of course. One of the big gameplay changes they made to this new South Park game is that it plays more like an SRPG. Like, you have your characters move onto square, so the battlefield is an arena, like maybe like sometimes it varies depending on which location it is, but maybe it's like set of 3x3 squares, and you move your characters over squares, and you have special attacks for each characters, and those special attacks will attack certain squares only. Like, think of these like certain patterns, like maybe one will attack in a cross pattern, one will attack maybe just straight in front of you, kind of like, think of the kind of special attacks you would see in FF Tactics or Disgaea, if you've ever played those titles. So all of the encounters with enemies in this game is like a mini boss now. Encounters can easily be avoided compared to the previous game, which is a plus, but the downside is you can't really grind as much in this game. You're pretty much forced to complete the main quest or side quest if you want to gain levels. The level system has been revamped, so now you can only actually level up to maybe level 10 or so, and each of the levels that you gain will let your character equip new equipment slots. That's what it unlocks when you level up, and you can use this to equip what we call artifacts, which will significantly boost your character's stats, like maybe attack and defense. So what they've done, and is a good positive, is that they've separated the actual cosmetics from your character. So the cosmetics that your character wears, like the clothes or hats or whatever, won't affect your character's stats like the previous game. So one thing I do like about this new South Park game is that there's no missables in the game. When I say missables, like the collectibles. Like in the previous game you had the Chin Pokemon, like the Pokemon parody in the old game, and those were very easily missable. Now it's not missable, because in the previous game they had areas where you could only visit once. Now they don't put anything in those kinds of areas. They don't put like unlockables, and if they do put them there, then it means that you can return to those places. And that means you can't miss unique armor like the old game, but of course that doesn't really matter as much anymore now. Now the armor and the cosmetics, the robes and stuff, it's just cosmetics. It doesn't affect your stats. But if you do miss, like maybe the artifacts, those are what controls your character stats. You can get them anytime if you miss one of those. There are definitely missable trophies in the game, but they're different. They usually make you do a lot more than you need to. But in terms of collectibles and stuff, it's a lot more friendly. Unfortunately, the map isn't unique. That's what really made me purchase the previous game in the first place. We all love South Park for the setting. Places like school, Skeeter's bar, Jimbo's gun shop, those were all unique in the previous game, but now it's just kind of recycled. And they changed the character designs, of course, so that's a plus, but the locations, it's just really, really recycled. Unfortunately, it seems like this game reused many assets. They could have made a longer story mode because of the fact that they reused the assets, but they really didn't do that at all. It's still about the same length as the previous game. I did see the developers trying to put a lot of effort into making changes to the game to try to make the game more fair and to be able to get new players into the game. I know that the developers have made interviews before, and they said that they used to invite a lot of the YouTube celebrities like PewDiePie to try to tell them what they could do to improve the game, make it more friendly. And, they did make a lot of changes, and it's a lot more friendly and relaxing. But this game doesn't feel different enough for me to make a purchase. My main criticism with the game is that the game really shits the bed, like, in the second half. The game's plot is decent enough to get through. I mean, we all know that South Park makes its own kind of jokes. It's purposely controversial. It's not really a soap opera. The plot gets cheesy and stuff, but it's not like there's any good plot twist. It's just them being as controversial as they can. Not as bad as the last game, but it's still pretty bad. The problem is that, I feel like there weren't many unique enemy designs, not many unique bosses. They end up using, the player characters that you control. You have lots of characters you can control, which is a plus in this game. But they end up using the player characters as bosses instead of actually just giving us unique bosses to defeat. people will often say that there's a boss in a laboratory that you fight close to the end of the game. It's not the final boss, but people will say to you that's the actual like final boss. That's the only thing that feels like a final boss, because otherwise it's kind of like a shitty boss rush in the end. I'm not spoiling anything, but they end up recycling a lot close to the end, and it really pissed me off. So the problem with the ending of the game is that they make a lot of the characters purposely fight each other, and it turns into like a convoluted mess, and it gets, and they also use a time travel plot, and it ends up just becoming very annoying. A lot of people speculate that the game was purposely made terrible to pave the way for more DLC purchases, especially considering that Ubisoft actually helped publish the game, so you know what that means. To understand the plot of the game, you also pretty much need to watch one of the episodes in the newest season of the show, but you can still appreciate the plot without watching that, but it's really recommended you do, otherwise the game seems like really weird if you don't watch that episode. I talked about how the game made previously like a lot of changes. Not all of these changes are good. A lot of people might not like the new grid combat. A lot of the people I have spoken with told me that they liked the previous game a lot better. I was able to bear through with the kind of grid attacks and stuff and get through it, but it's annoying because a lot of people say that, your own characters end up blocking your attacks and that it wasn't really made that good. Like, if they implemented such a system, they should have done it in a much better way. Another gripe a lot of people and myself have is that the side quests are not plentiful. You only get like 5 to 10 unique side quests in the game, and most of them are just run to a point, you fight a boss, you run to another point, you fight a boss. You get through them very quickly, especially compared to the old game, which actually had a few interesting bosses like Al Gore and such. This game didn't really have much of that. It's kind of boring. So yeah, I mean, this game plays kind of like a JRPG or an SRPG. Like, it has elements from both of those, but it definitely doesn't have the length of one. There's a couple of optional bosses, they're definitely there, but there's not many of them. And as I said, all of the enemies are like mini bosses, so there's only like 6 actual enemy types you'll fight in the game, which is actually very depressing compared to the old game. They didn't have to include so many unique animations for the characters, like when they bleed and get sick and stuff. They didn't have to include so much of that if they could have just given us more enemy variety instead. The difficulty in the game is no problem if you're scared of that. They've made this game a lot easier. They've also fixed the save system in the game. In the old game, it would pretend to save, and then when you actually loaded it, it wouldn't, because they would only save during autosaves. But in this game, you can actually manually save your game, and it will actually save, and it'll retain all the data. So it's a lot of, they actually fixed a lot of what was broken from the previous game onwards. Overall, my thoughts in the end is that it's a game with a lot of effort. If you didn't play the previous game, maybe you can pick up that one for cheap and play this one too. But if you played the previous game when it was first released, you might be a bit more mad at this one because it's more of the same. A lot of the game's controversial jokes, they might not be for everyone. A lot of people like the humor in the old South Park episodes, not as much in the new South Park, because the new South Park focuses too much on the social justice warriors and such. A lot of people don't really like the new kind of games that you have, the new kind of jokes and stuff. Like, it's just not that funny. I like the previous game's jokes a lot more, even though it was more controversial. I found it a lot more funny. But if in general, like, you might want to see if you like South Park first, because I know some people who wanted to play this game who are really into games but they're not into shows. So I recommend to such people maybe watch a few of the episodes of the show to see if you like that, if you're really unfamiliar with South Park. Like, watch a few episodes, and if you like them, then you can get into the game really easily, because I know a lot of people who didn't watch the show, they're really confused, and then when they go into the game, they're like, what the hell is this? This is just stupid. This kind of game isn't for everyone, so definitely watch a few episodes first, see if the humor is your kind of humor. But otherwise, yeah, overall, it's okay. But I do think the game was kind of a cash grab. I think that the game went through development hell. Like, originally it was made by, going to be published by THQ, and now they got bought out by Ubisoft. So, you kind of see them. They're just going to make use of what was already made and just publish that. So this game kind of feels like the old game as well. It was rushed. Has a really bad ending. I don't really recommend it at all that much. Maybe pick it up when it's a bit cheaper for a used price. That's my recommendation.